Welcome to before class lecture content for week 2 of professional development. Our topic today is going to be all about speech delivery components. Now, in addition to what we kind of talked about in week 1, let's spend a couple of minutes talking about the framing your narrative. If we go look at a recent TED Talk, and we look at the story of Richard Thierry. He's a 12-year-old Maasai young boy who invented a mean of thwarting lions in his Kenyan village with a series of strobing lights called Richard's lion lights. Now, this is good storytelling because we would see in that TED Talk we would see him bringing to life what it's like to be terrified of being attacked by lions and all of the methods that the villagers had used before he settled on an idea that he discovered through observation. The observation that he made was that certain light forms disturbed and repelled lions, and certain light forms didn't bother them at all. In fact, flashlights don't bother lions at all, as it turns out. But strobing light patterns that mimic the increase of intensity of a fire or the flickering of a flame, that pulsating in and out process, lions say, I'm going to stay away. So Richard's Lion Lights is this charming story about how a Kenyan village, rather than trying to hunt the lions, rather than trying to poison or bait the lions, learned how to coexist by the frame of lights around the village at night that would keep both the lions and the villagers safe. So when you frame your narrative, you have to first think about is choosing an appropriate topic, having a clear focus on the topic that you want to deliver, setting objectives, organizing your thoughts in terms of the structure. What's the structure of the narrative that you want to follow? And finally, last but not least, is are we matching the presentation for the audience? And we're going to briefly touch on each one of these key ideas. Now, when you frame your narrative structure, you have some choices, right? You can use what we call PREP, which is position, reason, example, position. We use this often in framing a position for a debate. You can use past, present, and future, which is narrative as a chronological story. You can also do a problem, cause, solution, which is very typical in business arguments. You can also do attention, interest, desire, action, which is persuasion. I'm persuading you to move from getting your attention to compelling you to act. And last but not least is tell it 3 times, which honestly is a little shopworn. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you, then I tell you, then I told you what I told you. Outside of informational settings, that's probably one to leave on the shelf a little bit more. If you are in a sales role or marketing role, you'll find that problem, cause, solution. Again, this is also used in scientific research, presenting findings. What problem have we solved today? If you are telling a story as the young Kenyan man did, that was very much a past, present, and future type of narrative. And if I am trying to persuade you for a cause, for an investor, raise money, political debate, I'm going to persuade you to vote for me, so I will go through what we call the AIDA sequence. Now, the next thing we want to talk about is, I don't know about you, but as a listener, there's a certain amount of joy when we understand and we go, aha! We get why we're being told something. It's that moment of discovery. And so the question you want to ask yourself is, does your narrative or your talk unfold like a detective story? Are you spreading breadcrumbs so that your audience can put the information together for that moment of clarity, for that moment of insight, for that big aha? You want to go deeper and be a little less broad if you're unfolding your story as a detective novel. You want to frame your talk as a journey. How will you see the world differently afterwards? And ideas and stories, they fascinate us, don't they? Because unlike stories about organizations and institutions, yay, this was a really great year for Apple. Look how great we are. Look at the new release of our software. Yawn, yawn, yawn. Oh, spare me. Do we resonate with those kinds of stories, or do we resonate with people? Was Steve Jobs or Jonathan Ive more compelling than some corporate gobbledygook speak that just drones on about what's magical about an institution over the last 12 months? Give me a break. But if that organization can focus on people, if you're a CEO, if you're trying to tell a story about your organization, don't talk about your organization. Talk about people within the organization. Talk about somebody that you've served. Talk about somebody's life who's changed. Talk about a heroic feat that somebody in your organization accomplished, going above and beyond, and better make it authentic. You do that, and you're providing something of interest, a human interest story that brings your corporate message to life. And finally, let your audience, please, let your audience draw their own conclusions from this narrative. Don't say, I'm going to tell you a story about a heroic driver. Let me tell you a story about a driver. And then describe those acts that are courageous. But you don't even have to use the word courageous. You certainly don't have to say, and thus the driver was heroic. Get the difference? Now, when you plan your delivery, there is a panoply between a report, which over here is literal, information, factual, evidentiary based. These are about research findings, about a financial presentation. As you move up the scale over here to a keynote address, from a product launch to a VC pitch to some type of a keynote in terms of a formal talk at a large event, which is a big, high stakes moment, which all of these TED Talks are, you go from something that's literal, something that's factual, to more dramatic, experiential, evocative, persuasive. So your story frame needs to fit the type of presentation you're doing. And now we get to the debate. Do you memorize or do you use notes? Let me give you an example of notes here. It's going to be more obvious because I'm talking to a camera. But if you were in the audience, you'd see the same thing if you were certainly up close. If I were using notes and I were talking about Jill Bolte-Taylor's talk, which is TED Talk number 4, which will be critiqued by Team 7, which we're going to hear about in class later on this week, her talk was memorized. She rehearsed it in her head over and over and over again so she could just focus on delivering word for word to the camera, to the audience, connecting to each person. Now, that's word for word, but what did I just demonstrate earlier? I demonstrated reading from notes. Does it work? Maybe, maybe not. Because if the entire time I'm not looking at you, I'm looking at my speech word for word that I'm going to deliver to you, then you're going to notice, number one, is it gets a little boring in terms of cadence, and number two is I'm never framed on you. So if you are going to use notes, Far better to use bullet points that you put on an index card that you just occasionally reference. Maybe once every couple of minutes if you can. Makes for a lot more direct eye contact, makes for a lot more natural eye movement when you're moving across an audience and going like this, and makes for a lot more human connection, which is what we want. Now, developing stage presence. There's no good way to do this except by practice, right? Unless you've done theater work, you've done dramatic stage work, and you've recorded for a camera, you've recorded for a film, or you've done theater work for a live stage. Now, Ann Cuddy, who is featured here. That's a Freudian slip for in a moment, which I'll get to. Ann Cuddy is featured here. She wrote a book on presence. It was the subject of her doctoral dissertation. And what she argued was rehearsing power poses. She argued for the importance of, if you practice looking powerful, you're going to be more powerful. Now, this is a pretty assertive pose, is it not? I'm looking directly at the camera, I'm looking directly at you, and what you see is, I'm ready to duke it out with you. It is almost as aggressive as if I lean forward and do this. Very different than if I present to you and I do this. We talked a little bit about this in week 1, didn't we? Now, the thing about body poses, to move naturally in your body and to feel very comfortable in presenting, is number 1 is we focus on body movement itself, keeping the lower body relatively still, and using hand gestures for emphasis, maybe using a slight change in the way we use our head. We turn our head, we look around. Eye contact is we want to pick 5 or 6 people that we're going to present to, or in this particular case, focusing on the camera, so each of you watching this will get the experience that I'm looking directly at you. On Zoom, like it or not, you're going to look into the webcam, which is going to be kind of weird because you're looking into the webcam, which is positioned on top of your monitor, which is going to be up here, and what you're not going to see is anything in front of you. You're certainly not going to see people. You're certainly not going to see your speaker notes. So that's something that you're going to have to work on and practice in this online class to get comfortable looking directly at the webcam in order to demonstrate the competency of making good eye contact. If you need to focus on your breath beforehand, right? Focusing on your breath beforehand, there's a great trick that the special forces have taught us. And the trick is something we call box breathing. You inhale for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. You hold it for 4. You exhale for 4. You hold it for 4. You inhale for 4. You hold it for 4. You exhale for 4. You hold it for 4. If you do that for about 2 minutes before you begin your talk, big signal, the pituitary, hypothalamus, amygdala axis pathway to stress response will remind you to stay in your prefrontal cortex and away from getting your amygdala hijacked, which is what happens when we're scared, which is what happens when we're stressed, when we're anxious, when we're fearful. When that amygdala gets hijacked and we have a negative stress arousal, right? We experience that rapid heartbeat, the shallowness of our breathing, our blood pressure goes up, right? We sweat, we're nervous, all that bad stuff happens, right? Bad stuff as a presenter, because remember I told you in week 1, I get nervous every time before I present, right? Including when I'm talking to a camera. So one of the things that I do is slow my breathing down, and I do that with box breathing, and you might find that helpful as well. And the last thing I'll say about generating that stage presence is the more relaxed you are, the more you can show being vulnerable. The more you can show connecting with your audience, right? The shyness of a smile, the looking down, the little bit of the, that kind of got me. In addition to just feeling confident, in addition to just being relaxed and to having nice, relaxed movements of your body such that people see you as a human being making a presentation. They don't see you in the form of somebody struggling to get a presentation out. You also want to plan, of course, in visual aids, you want to plan for how you're going to use multimedia. It will be a series of resources. We're going to talk about it in week 3. In our topic focus, you want to keep videos short when you're playing them in a multimedia type of presentation. Keep them short. Keep them very focused on the point that you're trying to make. Don't turn a quick clip into the presentation itself. That would be a mistake. Because at all times, you're the presentation. You're the presenter. The presentation is about what you're saying and doing, not the words on the page, not the video clip, not the sounds that they hear other than your voice. Those are all what we call supporting actors. The supporting actor that is supporting you, the principal. And if you use performance art, props, visual elements, you use your body, you want to do so judiciously. Now, there are 10 famous ways to ruin a TED Talk. I'll go through this list very quickly. I bet you can probably find others as well. Taking too long to explain the purpose of the talk, speaking slowly and dramatically throughout, which is great for if you're doing Macbeth, not so good if you're giving a presentation. Letting everybody know how important you are, that's through the excessive use of name dropping. Who you know, right? Doesn't land well. People don't want to have you try to impress them by how important you are. The talk is what's important. What you're trying to say is what's important. You're not. I'm not. That's the point. Make the most important thing that you're doing be the message that you're communicating, not the messenger, ever. And refer to your published work repeatedly or quoting from it, right? Not that anybody in the ivory tower might be guilty of that, but we might, right? As well as best-selling famous authors and former presidents. I'll leave you to fill in the blanks. Cramming slides with numerous text, bullet points, and multiple fonts, right? Using lots of unexplained technical jargon to sound smart. If you use something that's not common vernacular, you need to define it. Speaking at great length about the glorious accomplishments of your organization, we referenced that a little earlier. Not bothering to rehearse to see how long you're running, and sounding if you're reciting from memory. You've got it so memorized that you're basically phoning it in. And last but not least, refusing to make eye contact with anybody in the audience. Delivering your entire talk to the floor. We're going to have critiques in class that are going to actually pick apart some of the speakers that have a tendency to do that. So what we're going to see overall in assignment 2, what I hope to see from you, is challenges. Every one of these TED Talks as assigned has general presentation skill issues, verbal communication skill issues, nonverbal communication skill issues, and visual aid issues. Every one of these presentations are flawed. Every single one. Every single one of my recorded lectures is flawed. That's the nature of this game. We're not looking for perfection here, but we're looking for the ability to observe what can be better and to recognize that each one of us, our best performance in front of others can always be better. And that's to reassure those of you who are nervous, as well as to reassure those of you who believe that you're already an accomplished speaker. Your analysis may vary significantly from I'm going to post an answer key on the things that I saw. And that's good, right? Because the wisdom's in the room and we'll learn from each other. And every time we do this, I always learn from you because you see things that I don't and I'll see things that you don't. And we'll share that. But the point of the exercise is to develop a language for critique. You can improve your own confidence because you understand what you're trying to accomplish. Right? Fair enough? So are you ready for our class session? We'll see you soon.